And then I also get consistent referrals from fellow lymphedema therapists in our community. And that's been an interesting avenue that I never expected. But how that happens is they have a 3-month wait list. They get a script in, understand that the progressive nature of some of these symptoms, and will reach out to the patient and just say, we have you on the wait list. You will be seen in 3 months from now, but there is this other clinician, their private pay, if you want to reach out to them. So developing a great collaboration with people who are doing something similar in the community to you can surprisingly be a great referral base as well.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Again, it's been like 4+ years since part one.
Yes.
Really appreciate you taking the time. I know things are super busy in your practice. It's going great. I'm excited to bring you back and kind of catch everyone up on how it's been going. So welcome.
Thank you.
So let's start out, for those who haven't heard part one and aren't familiar with you, if you could just kind of fill us in on your background, what got you into physical therapy and brought you up to kind of that point of deciding to start your own practice.
I would love to. So what brought me into physical therapy to start off with is I was a ballet dancer, and I injured myself, had an amazing physical therapist, and it was around the same time I was about to enter college. So just trying to find out what I wanted to do with my life, was inspired by a physical therapist who helped me. And then I went through physical therapy school, not really knowing what kind of specialization I wanted, graduated from the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio, and then moved to New Mexico and started off in skilled nursing. Wasn't quite the right fit for me, was still searching for what I wanted to do specialty-wise. And my mother got diagnosed with breast cancer for the second time. And I over the phone, talking with her, figuring out what she was dealing with, realized that physical therapy has a very important place with someone who is dealing with cancer treatment. And so I reached out to a local women's hospital in New Mexico and asked if they were open to hiring me, where I could start a oncology rehab and lymphedema program for them if they would go ahead and basically sponsor or pay for my certification. And that's how it started. And so I developed their lymphedema oncology program at Lovelace Women's Hospital in New Mexico, and then eventually moved back to Austin. And when I moved back to Austin, I worked for a private practice that was specializing in pelvic floor physical therapy, because I really saw the need of pelvic floor rehab in terms of its integration into oncology rehab. And so got training with that private practice. And that private practice owner was very kind in being transparent about what it's like to actually run a private practice. So I learned so much from her and her amazing practice, and developed an oncology and lymphedema program with her practice. And then at that time, I decided I felt a bit distant from the cancer centers and the oncologists and that sort of the actual practicing clinicians. And so I took a job with a local hospital that was about to open up a breast care center. And so I worked for that hospital in outpatient orthopedics and also helped them develop their lymphedema program there. So that's kind of what led me ultimately to private practice. Is after setting up that program, I was seeing the need not only for a lymphedema oncology program that was highly specialized and focused on the patient population, but also feeling like there was a need for a multidisciplinary approach with this oncology population. In terms of, I can help them with their mobility, I can help them with their lymphedema, but I'm also referring them out consistently to a dietitian, to a massage therapist, to an acupuncturist, and to exercise classes in the community. And so I was thinking, what if we could take all of those things and put them into one practice that's multidisciplinary, but also is outside of the clinical hospital setting? Because we know that a large population of people who deal with chronic illness, as well as cancer patients themselves, when they come into the hospital setting or into a facility that they've received cancer treatment from, they have a bit of post-traumatic stress disorder. And so we're bringing them into that environment for them to receive PT or rehab. And I felt like that was not 100% beneficial for them to reach the outcomes that we wanted them to reach. So in 2016, I started Cancer Rehab Austin. Cancer Rehab Austin, we started off just with 3 practitioners, a massage therapist, an acupuncturist, and myself in a facility that had 2 treatment rooms and a really small gym. And went really well. We grew. December 2018, we grew into a larger space. I changed my name, the DBA, to Cancer Rehab and Integrative Medicine, because I felt like in order to market truly our multidisciplinary approach, I wanted to change our name to make that clear to the people that come to us. And so we've grown our space into 4 treatment rooms, a real large gym space where we can offer exercise classes. And we have 15 practitioners and exercise instructors now. So we've definitely grown significantly since the last time we talked, Jared.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, so just curious about the, the structure of that with, that many providers. Are you employing them? Are they contractors? Are they just renting space, for the classes they hold? How is that all set up?
So our exercise instructors are all contracted. And then our other practitioners that are oncology focused are renting room space, but are cohesive teams. So what I found over the years is I have changed our contract. It started off just saying room rental. And I have changed that over the last few years to make it clear that people are not paying into just a room rental. They're paying into our multidisciplinary clinic, our team. We cross-refer, we market together. And so I've changed over time the way we approach that to make it clear that people are paying for the value of being a team member and part of our multidisciplinary community.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't have any employees.
No employees, and then
Don't have the bandwidth to do that at the moment.
Well, I mean, what about administrative? Like, do you have anyone taking things off your plate for you?
Not yet. That's our next step.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, do that. Do that for sure.
Yes. Yes.
Like, mastermind students is when I finally can convince them to do it and take the lead. They're like, God, I wish I had listened to you earlier. Like I wish I would have, because it's life changing. But so with the contracted, say like personal trainer, exercise professional, is that a scenario where different, I guess, are you kind of marketing certain exercise, whether it's small group or classes, and you're collecting and then paying them to kind of fulfill that service, or are they kind of taking payment? What is how does things flow on those services?
Sure. For our exercise classes, they're donation based. And so we receive the donations, CRIM receives the donations, and then I pay the instructors a specific amount per class.
Cool.
And then we have contracted employees. We have 2 lymphedema therapists now that are helping me make sure that our wait list isn't too long. And they get a certain amount per treatment that they offer. But all of the payments and the billing goes straight to CRIM, goes straight to our company, and then we pay the lymphedema therapists every month.
So that you don't technically have like employees, but you are, subcontracting services out and paying people on like a per hour or per patient basis.
Correct.
Okay. And are you kind of saying like, hey, because you're a contractor, to make that legit, like you just control your own schedule and take what you can, or how is that structured?
They have specific days that the room is available to them. And I'm the one who is screening which patient is appropriate for which practitioner. And again, once we get administrative staff, we will have a checklist for screening that as well. But we get that script in, or we get that phone call in. And then if it's someone that's appropriate for one of these other therapists, or if I look at my schedule and realize I can't see this patient consistently in the frequency they need to be seen, then I will reach reach out to one of these individuals and let them know that this patient needs to be called.
Okay.
So I kind of sort through and filter through the scripts that we receive or the inquiries that we receive, and then send the therapist that information when
Okay.
appropriate.
Do you find, and for those, because this is kind of a model that I know a lot of therapists like to follow, and in a way, I mean, I myself even follow this model, and then I have, you know, my therapists that see patients in the clinic. Um, you know, it's my job basically to help to fill their schedules, right? And so, um, do you find there's ever an issue where if you're just paying on a per patient basis, and it's like, you know, maybe sometimes you have a lot of business and sometimes you don't, like kind of keeping that person engaged enough to where they will continue to work and come in and not like look for other work basically, and be available enough? I mean, how do you balance that of like making sure that if you have a need to use them, they're there, but you're not paying them a base salary or anything like that, and therefore it's like, well, what if things dry up a little bit? Do they start to freak out?
Right. Yeah, I reached out to these two individuals. I knew them in the community already, and they are already employed with other organizations as well. And so I reached out to them because of their specialization and their passion, and asked them if they have extra time to be a part of our organization. And they were individuals who, if I ever decide to actually employ people, would be brought onto our team. So really, they get their insurance from other, they're employed by another facility and clinic, and they're just helping me out because they love this cancer population. They love the multidisciplinary approach of our clinic. And so far it hasn't been an issue. But I think that that's specifically because they have other avenues that they're, receiving employment as well.
So before we get into kind of the things that have worked or maybe even haven't worked in the marketing side of this, right? Um, I'd love to hear a little bit, or maybe you can explain a bit about kind of this little bit of a sidetrack in from your original practice just recently, or it sounded like, you know, you kind of had brought your organization or your practice underneath the umbrella of a different one to help set up a program. So tell us about that. What were the things you know, first kind of the general structure of what that was like, and then what did you learn from that?
Right. I was approached by a clinic that was looking to start an oncology rehab program. And they are individuals who often collaborate and refer with me, and individuals that I know really well. And so I was very excited by this opportunity to build an oncology rehab program with this particular organization. And but knowing that they're in network and they follow the traditional model for their therapy services. And so it was a tough decision to make, but I decided, you know, helping the oncology rehab population and helping grow our local Austin community's offerings was really important to me. And so I agreed to it. And so I was with this organization as an employee. So, you know, getting benefits, salary, and they agreed that with my private practice would still remain my private practice no matter what happened long term with this collaboration, which was 100% important to me. That, you know, all of these years of hard work, that I maintained that if this didn't suit, what was comfortable for me. And I was with them with this particular collaboration for 9 months. And a lot of great things were accomplished in terms of creating an oncology rehab program that is still very successful to this day, has two oncology rehab therapists, gets consistent referrals. So very happy that Austin has a increase in offerings and availability for oncology rehab services. However, it did kind of ferment or solidify the ideas or the reasons why I got into a cash-based practice to begin with, or even why I got into private practice to begin with. In terms of things that I think we're all familiar with and can be frustrated with, red tape leading to it takes a little bit longer for things to be accomplished, for programs to be developed, and the wait list, the really long wait list that comes along with being in network, the having to stop treatment, the specific moment that insurance no longer decides to cover services or have a significantly increased amount per treatment once insurance no longer agrees to cover it. That's unrealistic for patients to pay. So all those reasons that anyone listening to your podcast, Jared, understands the benefits of cash-based, but it was such an amazing learning opportunity for me because, I think we all in the beginning experience some shyness and some perhaps maybe even doubt as to whether cash-based is the way to go, or when we're speaking to a potential client, sometimes it's hard to feel really confident with that conversation. And, I'd say 3 years into that, I was still a little, even though, I took your advice and I read your book and I listened to the podcasts and I was feeling much better with that, there still was a little bit that needed to be worked on. And this really helped me just realize that there is a great value to cash-based practice. It was the right fit for me. And so I backed out of that collaboration, still, work with this organization very closely, but went back to private practice, cash-based, and it was around that time when, right after I backed out of that collaboration, was when we grew into our larger space, increased our number of practitioners and all of that. So glad that I did it, but really excited to be returning back to cash-based as well.
So you'd mentioned like when insurance, decides not to pay, that sometimes their responsibility would go way up. Are we talking about like more than what you charge on a cash basis? Like far more?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you work under a hospital organization or one that's
Oh, this is
affiliated with a large clinic,
okay. Yeah.
mhm,
So
then the costs, yeah. So it was, so for a lymphedema treatment, if it wasn't covered by insurance, it would be up to $400 per treatment because that's what they're charging insurance companies for those treatments.
I'm creating kind of a presentation right now. And part of what I've been doing in creating that presentation is actually looking at the news stories, the stats, et cetera, on the differences in what is paid to different types of practitioners or to different types of organizations. And a big part of that is looking at, how much more, not just Medicare, but private insurances, all the above, third party payers as a whole, how much more they pay for the same exact service and sometimes the same doctor.
Yes.
You have a doctor in a practice that, a patient goes in 1 month to see him and their responsibility is $100 of the visit or something like that. Well, then the local hospital or large conglomeration corporate, healthcare entity buys that practice. They have, the bargaining power with these insurance companies to charge them so much more and maintain such higher rates. That same patient goes back for the same service, the same doctor in the same building. And now that $100 bill becomes $400.
Right.
And so I was kind of curious if what you were saying was exactly that, of like, yeah, it would jump up to way more than what you charge in your private cash-based practice, which, everyone's, oh, well, that's going to be more expensive, but it's actually not.
Right. And several of the people who end up becoming my patients are patients who have been capped off in those sort of settings, but continue to need care because in the oncology population, in the lymphedema population, it's a chronic concern and there are chronic needs.
Mhm.
And so it's appropriate to see patients for longer than what insurance companies will allow. So it does frequently happen where they will be in network for a while and then they'll come seek out our services because they do need continued care.
Okay. Very good. So again, I'm always wanting to get into the marketing side of things, but just along that same kind of train of thought, um, how aware does it seem that insurance companies are of the need for physical therapy with a wide variety of different types of cancer? Like, is it one of those things where a lot of plans that's like, when it comes to cancer, like we don't cover therapy because, or are most of them just inclusive of, it's just like, it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. You get this in this plan, you get this much PT, per year or whatever period. Like, is there a differentiation there?
It does depend on the diagnosis, but we find that the oncology population has particular like treatment diagnoses that are appropriate for any population, like fatigue, generalized weakness, range of motion deficits, pain. So as long as we are documenting in that way, insurance companies will cover it. And the same way they would orthopedic physical therapy.
Okay. Okay. Very good. There's just a little caveat that I was wondering about. Okay. So, and then when it comes to kind of being problem aware or aware that therapy can and needs to be a part of a lot of, oncology patients' overall care, how aware are the doctors, the oncologists? Is it a widely known thing and they just like everyone gets sent to PT, or not everyone, most? Or is it like not so known? Where do they fall in general on average in that awareness?
It's not as well known as it needs to be. Oncology rehab as a specialization is fairly new in the physical therapy realm. However, there was a great study that the University of Florida Davis Cancer Center did, where they just they distributed a survey to all of their cancer patients that basically asked their patients certain symptoms that their patients may be experiencing, that we know when we have data to demonstrate that oncology rehab can improve those symptoms or side effects or reduce those issues. And they found that 90% of the people surveyed have symptoms and side effects that could be improved through rehab. However, 10% of those patients were referred. And this is even within a cancer center that is aware enough of the benefits of cancer rehab to be doing this particular study, right? So they are aware, and yet for some reason, only 10% of the people are referred.
Oh, that the
And
percent being referred, that was just within that system, not.
within their system. It's even less if you just look at the general oncology population. And so there's a need, but there isn't, I think there's several reasons why there isn't enough appropriate referrals. I think one is, again, we are a new specialization. I think two, the medical doctors are dealing with a very serious diagnosis and have limited time with these patients. And so they're focused on keeping these patients alive, and they're having very complex conversations in a very short amount of time. And so sometimes the last thing they're thinking about, if they even know about oncology physical therapy, is that this patient needs these services. And then also, I think sometimes they think of it as after the fact, right? So for the patients who are not going to need to receive cancer care lifelong, they're thinking, oh, well, once we're done with their cancer treatment, then the patient navigator will screen and see what they need long term in terms of rehab. And then often they'll be referred to an orthopedic physical therapist who is not necessarily as aware of these specific patients' needs. Sometimes they are, and sometimes that's very appropriate. So I think one of the important things for anyone in any specialization to do is to be educating the medical community as well as educating the patient population themselves. Because if the physician doesn't have the time to address this, the patient is doing Google searches and learning all this information on their own. And so being out there in that form of educational awareness, or being out there letting people know what these services are, for both the medical community and for the potential patient population, is imperative. And then as patients benefit from this, and you mention, let your oncologist know that, this was very beneficial and that your fatigue has been significantly reduced, or you haven't had any more falls. Just happen to mention that at your next appointment. And then, you plant that seed, and then you end up getting more referrals.
So I think when a lot of therapists and non-physician listeners hear the idea of like, we have to educate the physician referral sources that we, not just what we do, but why it's so important. It's like it makes them cringe. It's like hard enough to get 5 minutes, with them in the first place. And then you want to go in and try to educate them on why they should send their patients to you. So you've obviously had a lot of success with that. Can you speak to that process and what you found most successful when you're in a niche? And I want everyone listening, like, obviously this is a very specific niche. Well, by virtue of the term niche, it is. But no matter what the niche, you are in a position where in a lot of cases you're going to need to do some level of educating potential referral sources or referral sources on not just what you do, but why it's important. So think in that terms and think about what Angela's saying in answer to this and apply it to your niche.
I think the least effective thing that I spent a lot of time on in the beginning was trying to do one-on-one meetings with physicians. I think that's least effective in terms of your time, in terms of their time. And then you kind of get them on board, and then they hear that you're cash based, and then everything else after that, after you've said that, is they don't pay attention to that anymore. And so what I have found effective is perhaps more creative ways to educate them on what you do. So detailed notes that you send back to them after a patient's evaluation. The more detailed you can be in terms of that, if they read over it and sign it, they do get information that way. Also on my script pad, I specifically have a checklist of it says physical therapy, but then below that it's got symptoms. So it's clear balance deficits, neuropathy, range of motion, axillary web syndrome, all these things. So it's a subtle way for them to understand all of the components of physical therapy that could be helpful for their patient. And then what I found the most effective, aside from telling the patient to mention to them on their next follow-up appointment how they're doing and the services that they've received, but also being a part of multidisciplinary meetings. So multidisciplinary meetings are tumor boards where all kinds of different physicians and practitioners come together to discuss complex cancer patients. And I think they have this with other types of patient populations as well, in the neuro field and specializations like that as well. But it's a great way to have a seat at the table as a physical therapist. Not only do I learn a great deal about what they're thinking when they're diagnosing a patient, coming up with their plan of care, coming up with the treatments, we get to see imaging, we get to see lab reports. So it's amazing in terms of an educational opportunity for me. But then also it's an opportunity when appropriate, and in the way I view it, every single cancer patient is appropriate for oncology rehab. But when it's very apparent, I will speak up when I'm hearing about this patient's story or these patient's symptoms to just let them know perhaps it's appropriate to refer to speech therapy, acupuncture, massage, because this patient is dealing with X, Y, and Z. And I never approach it as in perhaps it's appropriate to refer to me. But what we find in the physical, or actually in terms of tumor boards and multidisciplinary committee meetings, is that our rehab presence is very limited. And so now you are that one physical therapist that they see on a regular basis. You're the person that they think about in terms of that expert. You're the go-to person when they have questions. So you're educating them, but everybody is sitting there at the round table, educating each other and giving their insight and talking about new research and all of that. That's the whole point of that multidisciplinary committee meeting. And so it's a place where you can feel pretty comfortable representing rehab and letting them know what is an appropriate referral.
Okay. Very good. And I when you first told me when we were speaking on the phone about these tumor boards, as I guess they're commonly called, I and some of my students who are are getting into the oncology rehab niche, came up with some questions, and a lot of them are surrounding this. So I'd like to dive in a little deeper to some granular details that, again, the listener could then apply to their niche. I think in a lot of cases, not maybe all questions, but apply to their niche and get creative on how they can kind of get their foot in the door and work these angles. So who do you specifically reach out to get that seated or to ask for that seat at the table?
I've done it in various ways depending on the cancer center. The first and best way I think that would be patient navigators. So reaching out to either a nurse practitioner of a specific oncologist or the patient navigator and just ask, what are the times they normally have these multidisciplinary committee meetings? Is there a physical therapist already represented? How can I be put on the invite list? Because these particular meetings, they don't usually just invite the people from their cancer center or from their center. They tend to invite practitioners from all over to get the most input. And so I just asked to be added to that invite list. So that's been the best way. Other ways have been reach out to a specific medical oncologist that has referred to you in the past, or you have a complex patient that you're seeing, you reach out to their medical team and state, if you're going to talk about this person in a tumor board meeting, can I attend as I am part of their team to perhaps learn more about what you guys are, how you guys are approaching their care as well. So I think the best way is to present it as you want, which is true. You want to learn more. You want to be a part of this conversation to make sure that they have best quality outcomes.
Great. And if one of the questions you'd say, is physical therapy already represented? If there's, what if it's a like a system or like kind of like when you're saying like in Florida, Davis, like they actually had rehab already in their, in their cancer center. Like if that's the case, is there already always going to be a physical therapy there? Or if they say, look, we already have rehab in-house, like, do you still, if it's not like for, one of the patients you're already seeing, but like to just get a seat at the table, like, do you still say, can I still come? Or do you just say, probably doesn't make sense to go when there's already representation there?
I believe that, first of all, a physical therapist being represented at a multidisciplinary meeting, unfortunately, is very rare. So for them to say yes would be very rare.
Really?
And then second of all, I think that in terms of medical oncologists, there's usually 6, 8, 14 of them sitting at this table. In terms of surgeons, there's several as well. So it's not, there's definitely, they want as many people to pick their brain and to learn from as possible. So as of yet, I have never had someone say no when you state that you want to be a part of these particular meetings, and you don't have to attend all the time. A lot of them are virtual now. So it's something where just periodically, if you pop in, so they continue to know who you are. It doesn't have to take a whole lot of time, but it's something where you can just pick and choose and periodically pop into each different one. Basically become the expert in your specialization as they see it in the community.
Okay. And if there is already, an established PT at one of these, but they say, yeah, sure, please come. Like how, I don't know if you've been in that position ever before. It sounds like they usually don't have PT representation, but if you did, like, how do you navigate that?
I believe most of the time physical therapists really like to collaborate and work hand in hand and actually appreciates another person representing as well. So I don't, in situations where that's happened, I've had a dietitian and a speech therapist and an occupational therapist being in the same room as I am, and these tumor boards. And we've really fed off of each other and been very excited to have that rehab community in the same setting. So I wouldn't anticipate that it would be an issue.
And do you, like, as far as someone else listening and say even specifically in oncology rehab, like, do you suggest like trying to get involved in the conversation almost every time you're there? Or do you, if they don't mention anything that's like tied to, the types of symptoms and issues that we treat, do you just, sit back, or do you say, hey, does anyone know if this person is dealing with balance issues or whatever, and like bringing it up? How do you go about that?
What I personally believe is that since these physicians are so busy and there's only an hour and it's usually at 7 a.m., I speak up when it's really appropriate. Like I know that it's very obvious this patient needs these treatments. And I think that's important because the physicians then won't see you at these meetings as marketing. They see you at these meetings as someone who's actually discussing the research and looking at patient outcomes. So I speak up when very appropriate, but not all the time, because even the fact that you are there is of value in terms of getting your face known and having a seat at the table.
Okay, great.
And I think when you finally speak up, it's more meaningful that way as well.
Okay. And if we're talking about like actual marketing of your services, maybe not in the tumor boards, but maybe to certain people, in the care team, besides like the nurse navigator, like who do you like to kind of target with your relationship building and kind of face to face or even virtual, but like your personal relationship building? Who have you found it's really been beneficial for you to get to develop that relationship with as far as referrals go?
Aside from the nurse practitioners and the social workers, I think the other aspect are all of the other specialized practitioners like dietitians and speech therapists and occupational therapists and all the people who are similar to you and are spending time with these patients and seeing their needs and that perhaps they are appropriate referral. So that's been excellent. And then cancer resource centers, support groups, meeting with those navigators, the people who actually hear from these patients in the community and hear about their needs. That's been really beneficial as well.
Okay. I want to talk about the support groups too, but continuing on the line of like, getting referrals from some provider, some care provider along the way, like, do you find there are kind of typical or best entry points, like, maybe post operative or post radiation or pre, treatment of some sort? Like, where do you find that you're getting those referrals, and that people or providers are most aware that they might need to make that referral?
In the beginning, it's a little hard because things are so frantic for the patient themselves. Their focus is really to get into surgery, get that tumor removed, get into chemo. So I think that even if a patient navigator or a nurse practitioner or social worker is doing an excellent job educating them on these other services that could help them with their side effects, I think that is an overwhelming time where they will not perhaps remember that that's been mentioned to them, or they'll just choose to prioritize how they spend their energy and how they spend their time. So although sometimes we do get prehab referrals, to try to rehabilitate and get someone as strong as possible prior to their start of care, that's more rare. What we see most of the time is after someone has already started their treatment and is starting, unfortunately, to have side effects that are significant enough for them to mention it to their medical team and for their medical team to consider referring out, or for them to mention it to their navigator. And then I often will receive referrals from people who are done with cancer treatment and are now ready to be focused on now what? Now I can perhaps address these things that I thought were just a side effect of cancer treatment and didn't realize that they're going to be long-term issues if I don't address them.
Okay. So earlier on, you had mentioned how a lot of times when you speak to physicians, and as soon as it comes up that you're cash based, like nothing else beyond that point really matters. So, but then we get into like how you're getting referrals from all these other providers. So, when these other providers, the nurse practitioner, the patient navigator, like when they find out that you're not in network, how does that affect things, and how do you overcome those barriers if you find that there are any?
Excellent question. And I think there are some physicians that do not turn away from that. And especially plastic surgeons, I find that they, in our community, but of course, they're a little bit more they screen out who's appropriate and who perhaps isn't. They know about these patients and are thinking, well, this patient would be okay with a cash-based service. This is appropriate referral for them. They'll mention it to the patient. So the patient calls you and they're not shocked or surprised by the fact that you don't take insurance. So there are several physicians, if they understand truly why you practice the way you practice, and you've shown them in time that you can get great benefits and results, and it improves their patient outcomes from their surgeries, then you can get consistent referrals from physicians. But in terms of navigators and other practitioners that are there, they tend to be less reluctant because they, first of all, know the patient well. So the referrals that they'll offer are appropriate referrals for your setting. But then also, they're the ones who are going to know, oh, perhaps this patient has received treatment elsewhere and not received the results that they want. Or perhaps this patient, I don't want to say is desperate, but this is so important to them that they are willing to invest what they need to get better. So I believe, and they're more aware of what you do as well. An occupational therapist or a dietitian would be more aware of what you do as a physical therapist, perhaps, than an oncologist or even a surgeon. So I think that it's definitely, the conversation needs to be had about why you're cash based. And then I also get consistent referrals from fellow lymphedema therapists in our community. And that's been an interesting avenue that I never expected. But how that happens is they have a 3-month wait list. They get a script in, understand that the progressive nature of some of these symptoms, and will reach out to the patient and just say, we have you on the wait list. You will be seen in 3 months from now, but there is this other clinician, their private pay, if you want to reach out to them. So developing a great collaboration with people who are doing something similar in the community to you can surprisingly be a great referral base as well.
Yeah. I remember, earlier in the talk, you were talking about these long wait lists, and that kind of popped in my head as well. Like, I wonder if you actually market what you do to those who do the same thing, for that reason. So I guess anyone in a niche out there that, you find those who are insurance based are always on long wait lists, don't forget to do that and let others know, hey, I'm here. Somebody you really shouldn't have to wait that long, but you can't take them on.
Right. Similar, another niche would be pelvic floor rehab. And it's the exact same thing. Those wait lists can be pretty crazy. And so exact same thing in those sort of niches as well.
How do you get the foot in the door, or make that connection, and essentially like go into a quote unquote competitor, right? It's not necessarily that you're super competitive because of the situation with the wait list, but any tips on how you make that first contact and actually get them to say, oh wow, yeah, if I have someone that really can't wait that long, I'm going to send them to Angela.
Yeah, I think what's really worked out for me is we created a Austin lymphedema therapist support group that's a support group for the therapists. Because it's a small niche, we know each other in the community. And so once a month or quarterly, we would choose a facility to meet at. We would talk about challenging patients and how we would approach it, or we'd have some sort of continuing education component. And so one time it would be at my clinic, and people could really see what the clinic, how it's set up. It's therapeutic sort of environment, and they would have that in mind when they refer people over. But also we just get to know each other, and that we have patients' best interests in mind. And so I think that was a really great avenue, support groups for the practitioners themselves. And then also when I have monthly regular educational classes and seminars, and inviting these other therapists perhaps to actually present on a particular topic that they want to present on. So it becomes more of a collaboration, has been beneficial.
Those kind of monthly things, those are for providers. It's not necessarily for patients.
No, or for patients. Yeah, or for patients as well.
Cool. All right. Well, let's stay on the support group thing, since that was another one that I know you've utilized. So, tell us a bit about that. What kind of support groups in the area have you connected with? How do you get a foot in the door and not be turned away because you're essentially have a service that you're wanting to market in some way? So, yeah, tell us about that.
Having a topic that is a topic that almost everyone in that support group is interested in or isn't dealing with. So not necessarily approaching the particular organization by saying, oh, I want to do a talk about physical therapy and the benefits of oncology rehab when you're undergoing cancer treatment, but instead doing a talk on, let's say, fatigue and how perhaps exercise can help with fatigue. Or during COVID, how can you continue an exercise program when you can't go to a gym? So things that are super important for anyone dealing with cancer treatment. But as you do your presentation, of course, you're mentioning what you do. Of course, you're mentioning the benefits of it. So then when they need oncology rehab, they'll reach out to you. So finding resource centers, support groups, letting them know all of these side effects that their patients or their community deal with consistently, how exercise can benefit that. Or we've done some on neuropathy, a very multidisciplinary approach to dealing with neuropathy. So there's a balance component, and there's all these other things that are very specific to physical therapy, but also discussing other things as well. So I find that that's the best way. If you go at it like, I want to market oncology rehab and crim, they're not going to invite you.
Mhm. So you'll literally like send an email or make a phone call and say, hey, I have a presentation on this topic that is a concern of most of their members. Would you be interested in me presenting or
Yes.
okay. So just,
Yeah, or if I have a patient who it uses that resource center consistently, I'll say, we have a mutual client, and they've mentioned how amazing your resources are for them and their recovery. I'd love to learn more about what you do, and I would love to be able to educate the community in any way you need, or just starting the conversation that way too.
very good. Yeah, the warm intro or the name dropping
Mm-hmm. Yep.
is awesome. And so how do you find all the different groups? If I don't, this is outside of my niche and my world. So like in most major cities, are they going to be at like diagnosis specific groups or just a few general cancer support groups? What have you found to be the case?
Both. It's easiest to find the more general oncology cancer groups, and then over time you just start hearing about these other little more like head and neck cancer groups or urogynecological support groups, and but those can be harder to find, and you just hear about it over time, either through fellow clinicians or through your patients. So starting with the larger organizations and then learning about it from there, and as you go along. And I've even done Google searches too, and now that we do a lot of more stuff virtually, I've been able to do more national presentations as well, which may not seem like that is going to be very beneficial, but your name gets out there. And so then someone locally is going to, or they're gonna be like, oh, my grandmother is in Austin, Texas. Oh my gosh, I need to let her know about this. So yeah, really, I mean, there's large groups, and then there's all of these little small ones that just over time, as you're part of that community, you get to know
Okay.
about.
That's a great point. I would want to echo is, don't, even if you like, if you have an opportunity to do like a presentation that's national or isn't specific to your local market, don't shy away from that. There's potential utility in that. I mean, even just having the recording of it and being able to put it in market that you're doing national presentations, that social proof and the establishing yourself as a national expert, that's huge. It can
Right.
really get a lot of mileage out of that, even if it's not just like to a local group. So that's, and then I would guess maybe there's Facebook group opportunities
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Facebook group. Yeah, absolutely. Facebook. Um, Yep. And then actually what we did is we started our own virtual exercise classes and our own lymphedema support group. Um, And that's been super beneficial as well. I mean, we've been bringing people into our community that would not normally have been brought in otherwise. And that can ultimately lead to a referral as well.
Great. These are some really great, approaches that I think can be applied to a lot of, really tight niches. And, what I really liked about bringing you back again and just this particular niche is that you're dealing with patients who a great deal of their care is paid by insurance. Huge bills, and most of what they receive is on an insurance basis and not a cash pay basis. So, what have you found? I mean, does that kind of put up a barrier to entry? Do a lot of them kind of call expecting you to take insurance? And just give us an outline of how you deal with that being the situation in your niche.
Yes. So all I know is my niche. And so I don't know how to compare it in terms of someone calling in and expecting for you to be in network. But I would say, yes, the majority of our patients or potential clients call expecting us to be in network with insurance. I mean, it's the first thing that they ask. So what I have found, first of all, is they don't completely understand what we do. And so I start off the conversation with, tell me about what's going on with you. Tell me how we can help you. What have you been experiencing? And we get them talking. And then, oh, well, these are the things that we can do to help you. These are the things we can do to help you reach your goal. So then by the time we talk about the fact that we are cash-based, first of all, they realize we're highly specialized. They're not just talking to an organization that perhaps doesn't have an understanding of their oncology treatment, because as we're communicating with them, we're using those words, those medical words about their treatment that's specific to what they've dealt with. So they see this is different, it's specialized. And then they also realize that perhaps all these things that they put great value to that they never thought they could get back to doing, they can potentially, there are treatments out there, we can help them. So then that is a little less shocking when we say that we don't take insurance. But I'd say about 50% of the people who reach out to me don't ultimately receive treatment, because cancer treatment in itself is very costly. There is actually what we call cancer treatment bankruptcy, right? Where people just, it's too costly for them to be able to afford any other services. And what you can do in those situations is I always make sure that community that we were talking about of other lymphedema therapists and other oncology rehab specialists, I tell the patient that I've been on the phone with that give me your email. I will let you know all of our free services or our donation-based services that we offer, those exercise classes, the support group, our resource page on our website. And then I'm going to send you a list of all of these other practitioners that are in network. And that's not a waste of my time, because these are, first of all, the patient can use these other services. And second of all, we care about these patients' outcomes. But also, years in the future, they may still be dealing with side effects from cancer treatment. Their financial situation may have changed, and you're the person that they think of reaching out. So although it is a challenging population, there are patients that are completely appropriate and will come to you and won't even blink twice about your rate or your services. And then there are others where they're going to realize that there is something unique about what you offer, or they've gone elsewhere and not received the results that they want, and then they'll reach out to you.
Yeah, that we see that a lot. I'm gonna see what other options I have, and then no problem, and just kind of pre-frame them like, look, if you're not getting the results that you want and not able to get back to running your 3 miles 3 times a week like we just established was your goal, we're here for you. And we
Right.
definitely hear back from people, but it's important to plant that seed. And even like we have Google reviews that talk about what you just did as well. Like, I actually didn't come in to see them, but they were so helpful and they made this great referral. And so there is utility, in that, even though it takes a bit of time and maybe in the beginning doesn't result in business. And it's also the right thing to do, right? So,
Right. Well, and another interesting thing, though, is because these patients are getting so much costly treatment from multiple chemotherapy treatments or multiple radiation treatments, is that perhaps that they've actually reached their out-of-network deductible by now. And so if that's the case, because a lot of surgeons are out of network or a lot of their services. And so if you offer them a super bill, you let them know they've reached their out-of-network deductible, perhaps they can get reimbursement that way as well.
do you see that a lot? Like a lot of your patients getting reimbursed something on an out of network basis?
hmm Yes, yeah. For that reason is because I mean they jokingly they're like I reached my deductible in the first week of the new year, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
So,
I know that feeling.
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's good to know that a lot of them are able to get some, because it seems like these days almost every plan, it's not just one deductible anymore. It's unfortunately it's the in network and the out of network. So
Right.
a few years ago we were able to kind of lean on that, the deductible thing more, much more than we can now, because they're always, two deductibles. So well, this has been awesome. And I guess just to kind of round it out, I'd love to ask if there's anything else that has just really worked well, or big lessons learned that we haven't brought up, in this round two of our interviews here.
I mean, I would definitely say that don't underestimate what a patient is willing to um, offer in terms of their quality of life, and don't assume that a patient is going to have issue with the fact that you're private pay. And we do see that with referring physicians potentially, where they'll not even offer this service because they're already thinking that the patient wouldn't be willing to pay it. Patient finds me from a completely different avenue and they mention, they're like, I really wish they had mentioned this is worth every bit of what I pay. And they actually are frustrated with the fact that the practitioners on their team are making that assumption for them instead of letting them know all of the services that are available to them and letting them make the decision as to whether that's an investment they're willing to pay. So I found that very interesting. Um, and then I think another thing that we started in January is a not-for-profit, a sister organization for called Moving Beyond Cancer Collaborative. And that was a way for us to reach out to the population that potentially is not the population that we serve through our private practice, but is a population that needs these type of services. But through that, we're getting the word out about our other organization as well. Since we're sister organizations, it's perhaps a way to get our foot in the door in terms of helping the community understand what we do and what we offer, but also allow us to treat or offer services for the underfunded or underrepresented population as well.
That's great. And how do you guys go about, is it just a matter of everyone coming together and saying, I'm going to do, X amount of pro bono work, or do you utilize students? How do y'all make that work on the financial side of things?
So it's donation based. And so right now it's for all of our exercise and wellness classes. So we don't have practitioners offering treatments yet through that organization, but we find that people donate and we are able to pay our instructors that way. But ultimately what we're going to look at is perhaps creating a screening tool through patient navigation for the people who are appropriate for those type of referrals, as they are understanding and are aware of a patient's financial situation, and then having a specific practitioner be paid for their services at a specific rate through that organization.
Cool. Very good. That's awesome. Y'all are doing that. I like it. Well, thank you again so much. This has been great. I'm excited to immediately share a ton of this with one of my, the students that they're getting into this niche. And it's certainly seems like it's underserved, high need niche. And I hope that, somebody out there hears this and decides to help out people with these needs in this scenario, because it's obviously it's a devastating area that really needs our help as therapists. So thank you
Absolutely.
for getting the word out and making, you're definitely benefiting far beyond just those that you touch with your hands, for sure.
Thank you, Jared.
Yeah. All right. So we'll do a part 3 in about 4 years.
Perfect. It's a plan.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cash-Based Practice Podcast. If you liked what you heard here today, we have some extremely important things we want to send you. First, a quick start guide to cash-based physical therapy and Medicare. This free ebook will provide the primary rules and regulations surrounding this confusing but important topic. Secondly, we want to share with you the 5 characteristics common to all successful cash-based practices. Find out the vital things Jared has learned from years of interviewing cash practice owners and running his own successful cash practice. As one of our listeners, we want to give you all this information absolutely free. You can get it right now by going to drjaredcarter.com/success. Again, that's drjaredcarter.com/success. Go there now to get your copies, and we'll see you next time.